here have done a financial plan with a financial planner to know what you need for retirement? In the process, okay. Well, if you're goal-oriented, and most of you, I would assume, are goal-oriented, anyone not goal-oriented here? Then why wouldn't you first find out what it is you need to comfortably retire and to do whatever legacy you want? Because the idea here is to figure out, okay, what do I need to retire? What are my other assets? Then where's the business in comparison to that? If the business has a higher valuation, then you can look at, I've had clients who've come back with financial plans and they discovered they had way more value in their business and they were more likely to do legacy and sell to management knowing that they were probably selling it for a lower price because they knew that. So the idea here is, and if you're not positive, how are you going to get there? How are you going to grow your business to get to that number? And one other thing I want to mention that I didn't mention in what I'm doing, I've also had several situations recently where I've done perpetuation plans to transfer from within the family, then putting two families together to start to grow the company, to do a roll-up strategy, because now the kids have taken it over. How are they going to grow the business for their retirement, assuming they're also paying the senior generation? So we look at also how do we grow the business once you have an acquisition. All right. I will say that in Alan's deal, it may have been that he did it on EBITDA. I'm going to tell you that for the most part, when I've dealt with Gerber, Caliber, and other sales, it's a percentage of gross sales. And it's generally based on, the percentage is going to be based on dollar gross sales and number of locations. If you can create a geographical region for a Caliber or a Gerber, they're going to pay you a lot more, because the idea then is then they can put in a regional manager potentially to run multiple shops. So this is a thing to look at, is looking at how you're going to grow the business for acquisition. Okay. I would say general rules of thumb. If you're under $5 million, you're looking probably between 30 and 50% of gross revenue. If you're 10 to 25 million, you're probably looking at somewhere between 50 and 75. And if you get up to 80, if you get up to 25 million, you're probably looking in the area of 75 to 85% of gross revenue. If you enter in a situation where they're going to, and this is where you can get, recently had a situation where client owned one body shop, but on the location, they had two shops effectively. One was for mechanical and one was for body work. When Caliber came in, they said, we're not going to do mechanical work, but we still want the building. And they paid them nothing for the gross revenue that they were going to pick up by the 3 bays that they were picking up with this mechanical shop. These are things to look for in dealing with this. You heard the term EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. EBITDA is basically your profit, except you are allowed to do what are known as owner add-backs. Owner add-backs are, for you as an owner, you're getting compensated in 2 ways. You're getting compensated for the services that you're performing for the entity. That's what you would pay a third party to do what you're doing. Then there's everything else. The everything else is what the add-back is. You don't completely eliminate your salary in an add-back because someone's going to have to do that work internally. So the idea here is looking at that. So the add-backs are, car benefits, gas allowances, used to be country club memberships. Unfortunately, the IRS has completely eliminated any deductions for that, so that's not as big an issue. But other things they're going to look at. They're going to look at your certifications. They're going to look at the real estate, how quickly you have to close. If you're rushing to close, it's going to hurt you in valuation potentially. Can you retain your management team? And we're clearly going to spend some time talking about retention of the management team. And who is the purchaser? Is it a strategic partner or competitor? Is it someone like in private equity who's buying you purely for an investment? Different companies, different types of acquirers will feel differently about the retention of your management team. But if you are doing an investor, they're clearly going to want your management team. Also, investors and strategic partners are generally going to pay more than family or management. You're also probably going to be financing, if you are selling to family or management, you are going to be probably taking a lesser price, and you're probably going to be their bank. And I can tell you, we're going to talk a little bit about being the bank, but just because you're lending money to a child doesn't mean you do not have all of the same protections that a third-party lender would have. The idea that if you're selling to family, that they have to give you quarterly financial statements. If they're going to go out and spend $100,000 on new equipment, which is going to impinge your equity, they need to come back and get your consent. So it's how do we protect the seller, if the senior generation, and how do you make sure that they run the business correctly and don't run it into the ground and tank your retirement. I had a situation like that not too long ago, and the father said, "Oh, I don't want all this complex legal stuff in the notes. I trust my kid." Well, unfortunately, the kid decided to build a second location, which ran $1 million over budget, and ended up having to go into bankruptcy and tying up the property, which the father had for a year before he could turn around and rent it to someone else in the field, because there were no cutouts. There weren't the documents that said that if you go into bankruptcy, we could terminate the lease. These are things you have to consider in advance.